Have you ever wondered whether the problems in the world today would exist if we had deeper connection to ourselves, others, and the environment, and acted from that place?
Welcome to the Conscious Action Podcast with your hosts Brian Berneman and Kayla Greenville, who believe that connection is the key to taking conscious action as individuals and creating a better world.
We are here to raise awareness and inspire meaningful action by sharing stories, knowledge, and conversations with thought leaders and change makers.
From sustainability to well-being and everything related to conscious living, our mission is to empower you to be the change that you want to see in the world. Welcome everyone to a new episode of the Conscious Action Podcast. I am Brian Berneman, your host, and for this episode I have the pleasure to be joined all the way from the US in Philadelphia by Shana Francesca. Thank you very much, Shana, for taking the time to be here. It's lovely to connect again with you. Yeah. For everybody that is listening to this episode, what can you share about who Shana Francesca is?
Yeah, absolutely. First, thanks, Brian, for having me. And who I am is, I always I feel like I always answer this question differently because we are so many different things, right? We're never just one thing. But who I am is, I'm an interior designer. I'm a life designer. I'm someone who is very passionate about living our lives from a place of intention and designing our lives and understanding that designing our lives isn't about doing more or consuming more. It's about getting more intentional about who we are and what we're doing and then we become really conscious about what we're consuming. And that isn't just physical, that's emotionally, spiritually, what's going into our body. And it's all these layers of things, all these layers of choices that build on top of one another. And so I work with clients all around the country right now and looking to work with clients all around the world to work with them as an interior designer, but also to help them get more attuned with designing their whole lives.
Beautiful. And I have a lot of follow-up questions for all of this. But first I wanted to ask you if you can share a little bit more about your path and what led you to this.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I grew up in a household that was not very kind and very traumatic. And I suffered with several traumas. My earliest memory is of trauma. And it lays the groundwork in your life to see and to understand how many rules and things are put on us from the time that we're born based on who raises us and the society and the culture that we're raised in. And it really suppresses who we're meant to be. And the outgrowth of that generally is anger and meanness and inflicting trauma on others. And for me, I made the choice early on that I did not want to be my parents. And many kids say that, I don't want to be like my parents, right? But I didn't know how that was going to happen, but I knew that if I continued on the path that they were setting for me, that I wasn't going, that it was a certain kind of death. And it may have been an actual death at some point. And so I started designing my life, and I didn't have that language yet, but I started ripping pages out of these catalogs, these big catalogs that we would get in the mail a few times a year. And they had everything, everything from clothes and camping equipment to drapes for your house. And it was one of those kind of stores. And I would just circle all the things that I wanted to be part of the vision for my new life. I was vision boarding, really, but I didn't have that language for it yet. I was just circling all the things, and I was like, this is the life I want. This is who I want to be. I want to be the person who has a beautiful life, who feels safe in it and seen, right, and heard and understood. And then I started tearing, back then we used physical calendars, right? And so I would tear the pages out of physical calendars, and I'd always get ones with beautiful inspirational quotes. And I just started pasting all these things all over my wall, just taping them or pinning them all over the walls of my bedroom. And just as a constant reminder of who I was becoming. I didn't know how I was going to become that person, but I knew I was meant to be. And whether I was meant to be or not, that's who I was choosing to be. That's the path I was choosing for myself. Whether a higher power chose it for me or not, that's what I was going to do. And that's who I was going to be. And then I also started noticing, when really terrible things would happen in our house, that I would start moving all of the furniture around, or I would clean. I would take on some project that would change my physical environment. And I guess at some point it became clear to me that what I was doing was it was like I was breaking my association with what was, and creating the new stage, setting a new stage from which to tell my story from, right? And now I really truly believe that our physical environment is the stage from which we tell our life story. But we have to know what story we want to tell to be able to have that environment reflect that vision for our life, right? Because no matter what, typically our homes are a reflection of how we see ourselves, of how we understand our life. And as we start to change our physical environment, and that doesn't mean we throw everything out, right? That could be straightening or organizing or putting a coat of paint on something, or just wiping it down and organizing it. It could be a variety of different things, right? It's just how we understand our environment. It reflects who we are. And then I just was like, I think this is something that I could do for a living. And so I went to college and got my Bachelor of Science in Interior Design, and thought I was going to work in the commercial world, like doing offices and corporate, environments for the rest of my life. And I did that for 10 years, or maybe a little longer, actually. And then 5 years ago was like, actually, I feel really drawn to work with people individually, or as a couple, or as a family. Like, I really wanted to take this philosophy that had been fostered inside of me for 15 years, since I had graduated college, and just do something with it. And so 5 years ago, I started my own firm. So it's been a long journey through my life, and understanding my voice, and understanding how I found my voice so that I could help others find theirs. And what I recognize is it doesn't matter it doesn't matter who you are in the world or where you are in the world. There's always another level of intention in our lives. There's always another level. There's always another aspect of the journey, something else to learn, some other thing that we can grasp and gather towards us until the day we die. And so it doesn't matter where people are in their lives. I work with clients of all kinds of backgrounds and understandings of their life. And it really is just such an incredible and interesting journey that I don't know that I would have been on if my life had been any different. So yeah, that's who I am. And that's kind of how I got to where I am.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. I think that, there is a lot of really interesting things. In the last, 7 years or so, I've actually run a lot of times this workshop that it's called Rewriting Your Life. And it's about, or rewriting your story, actually. And it's about understanding how to look at what came before, and how to reframe certain aspects of it as a now adult in this moment, whether they were really traumatic or not, or whatever it is that happened. It is what happened, and how can we as adults and at this moment integrate them, heal them, and being able to understand how to be able to move from that as well, how to use that and be grateful for what it was, which is a really difficult thing, especially for those that had a really traumatic childhood, and to be able to choose differently. This is why, for me, conscious action is so important, as you were saying, with intention, and to be able to write the new script for the life that we want from now on, knowing that all of those are tools and are things that we can use. And as you say, like, your life is what led you to then being able to to help others how to find their voice, how to find that thing that sparks them to move. And I think that is a really important aspect of being able to see our own gifts and our lives as a gift as well.
Yeah. To write our own story, right? Because I think so many times we believe that our story is written for us, whether we believe that consciously or unconsciously. I think many times we move through life not recognizing that our life is a series of choices that we are making, right? And there are external, pressures and energies and things coming into our life, but we ultimately have the choice of how to respond and what to make it mean, right? We get to choose what it means. And when we understand that, then we begin to write our own story, as opposed to letting it be written for us and then just reacting to it, right? We take a more actionable step in our own life. We're like, no, I'm going to write this story. I get to decide what that means, and I get to decide who I am as I move through my own story.
Yeah, and one of the things, as you said that, like one of the things that I noticed with a lot of people that I've worked through the years is this, it's not about destiny, but a lot of times it's about being a victim of our circumstances and staying in that place that it's quite comfortable because I can say like it's all like I can externalize.
It's someone else's fault.
Yeah, I can externalize all of it instead of taking responsibility and being like, oh, I am co-creating this with the universe or God or whatever it is that we create, that we believe in, and how to take that responsibility and being able to be like, okay, yes, there's a co-creation here. What am I choosing now?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think sometimes we might not use the word victim, but the minute we start blaming someone else, right, we have already assumed the role of victim in most cases. I haven't run across one where that isn't true, right? And so when we recognize it's not that everything that happens is our responsibility, but how we react to it, how we respond to it, and how we choose to move through it is our responsibility. And so, understanding that is really, really important. And I think that is something that we have to be taught, right? It comes back to like resilience and understanding the courage it takes to just feel it, be in it, right, for a minute. But then we got to move through it, and not stay stuck in it. And I think, for many of my clients, when I work with them, I can see the places that they're stuck in their life, in their physical environment. Your house could be meticulous. Your house could be perfect, everything in its place. But even that is a tell, right? Like that even tells me a story, right? Because perfection is its own kind of dysfunction.
Yeah,
so definitely. Like there's all kinds of things. And it doesn't mean if your house is perfect that, you've suffered some trauma. I'm not saying that, right? But our need to always put the most perfect foot forward, that is itself something like, oh, okay, I can see that there needs to be some freedom here, right? It's not about our house being perfect, and it's not about it being a mess. It's about it being perfectly suited to who we are, right? And so, yeah, I think the way that I can tell, and the way that I want people to be able to look in their environment and be able to say like, oh, I think I'm stuck somewhere in my life because this doesn't feel like me, right? This isn't the me I want to be. This is stuck, right? And to like kind of move through that and reorganize their life and create their home as a vision board for their life, as the stage they're going to tell this beautiful story from. But like you were saying, it's really important to establish what is that story we want our lives to tell. Like we have to figure that out. We have to understand what is the why, what is my purpose, who do I want to be in this world, and align our action with that. It's not about strong arming the universe as much as it is about setting an intention and aligning our action with that intention.
Yeah, definitely. And, I think there's something I remember many years ago now that one of my teachers, we were talking about, like what is above is below, what it's like within is without. And he was talking about it from a place of understanding ourselves. He was talking about it as an understanding, and this is relevant from what you do, that is, like our spaces, how is that a reflection of us, or how are we a reflection of our spaces, and how can we work with ourselves in terms of our personal growth or development, understanding what do I want to focus on? Do I want to focus on the external? Do I want to focus on the internal? Because whatever I choose, there's going to be an impact on the other one.
Yes, exactly.
And that is, my teacher used to put the examples a lot of times as, if your mind is very scattered, clean your room and then notice.
Yes, exactly. There is an absolute direct, and I think I think we used to have that understanding, right? We used to be more careful about what and who we allowed in our front door, in our homes, right? But I think social media and all of our constant interaction with stimulus has allowed things in our home through our phone, right? That we normally wouldn't allow in our front door, right? And so there's this energetic interaction between what we view on our phone, what we hear, what we see, and our physical environment. And so understanding that is really important, so that if all this chaos is coming out of our phone, it's going into our head and then it's reflected in our environment, right? So if we feel like we can't get our head together, maybe it's time to turn off your phone for a few hours, right? Not just turn it on do not disturb, maybe just turn it off, or put it in another room and turn it off so that you can't see it and aren't gravitated towards it, because it's like a siren call. It really literally is an addiction, right? So I understand that can be really hard, and that might bring some panic up for some people. But if you turn it off and you put it in another room, it might help to alleviate that so that you don't see it, right? And then you can clean your room and you can be present and you can stay focused. And then you can be like, oh my gosh, I can hear myself, right? Oh, is that what I sound like? Because we've forgotten what we sound like inside, right? We've forgotten the sound of our own voices because there's so many other voices in our life, and so many things coming at us all the time. So it's really helpful to limit our interactions with external stimulus and to clean up our physical environment. And it cleans up here really beautifully. Everything is energy. So it's all interrelated. And when we understand that, we understand that everything we do affects everything else. Not just everything else for us and everything else in the world. It's all interrelated. And it can feel overwhelming, maybe at first or at times, but then it's kind of actually then there's I don't know, for me, there's a kind of peace about it. It's quite calming, actually, because I'm okay, all right, I'm connected to everything else in this world. So I know I'm really cared for, and when I let myself be really cared for by taking care of my physical environment or putting my phone away for a little while to give myself peace of mind, that is just that is all by itself an affirmation that I matter. And then I get to send that energy out into the world too, that everybody else matters too. And I get to carry that energy with me.
Yeah, that's very fun. And I think that, I usually say that the biggest thing is about developing this or reconnecting, because that is, what we lost. We are so disconnected that from ourselves, from others, from our environments, that is the main issue that we have. When we actually reconnect, we can understand better the energies and the capacities that we have for feeling nourished, feeling loved, feeling that we are being held, and feeling that our spaces are actually part of that as well. And and I want to ask you something that I think that it's really interesting, is that these past few years now, most people have been at home. And I think that a lot of people rediscovered their spaces from a different place, but as well they had to spend a lot of time in their own spaces. What have you noticed in terms of what you do and your work with that?
I've noticed that I was talking about all these things, maybe not in this exact way, before the pandemic, but I think because there wasn't as many people listening to what I was saying before the pandemic. But once the world shut down, all of a sudden people felt what I'm saying, right? They like felt it deep in their soul because they knew all of a sudden whether or not their home was set up in a way that actually supported them and their family and their life, right? They very quickly figured that out. If it was an environment that truly supported who they are and how they see themselves moving through the world. And for many people, the answer to the question, is your home set up in a way that authentically connects to who you are and authentically supports and reflects what you need to accomplish in a day or how you need to just be in the world? The answer was no, right? And they came direct up against that in a way that was very unpleasant for many people, right? And I think there was so many challenges for so many people, and so many rooms had to take on so many things that it just wasn't set up for. That all of a sudden people were like, oh yeah, I need to renovate my house. And I'm like, you do? Yeah. We need to change a few things. Yeah. And for many people, it was like reorganizing and just understanding, like, what do I do in my house? How do these things, what does that schedule look like? Like, how many hours am I doing this thing? What are these other things that I'm doing? How can they match up? And what rooms can they be? Can these two things or three things or whatever things be done in the same room because they're not done at the same time, right? Can they live in the same room? And how do we combine these things so we can make the best effort out of our room and or out of our home? And many people, I think, prior to the pandemic might have had space in their home that they weren't using. It wasn't set up for them to use on a daily basis. It might have been like a formal dining room or something that like no one really ever uses unless you entertain all the time. But during the pandemic, you weren't entertaining. So all of a sudden that formal dining room became office, became all of these other spaces. And I think we gained this understanding that, like, sure, when we buy a home, all these rooms have proper names, but that doesn't mean that's what we have to use them for. And we actually never have to use them with the name that they're properly designated, right? We can make it yoga studio or office or kids playroom or whatever it needs to be to support us in our life, because ultimately it's our home. So we don't want to reserve an entire room in a house to entertain twice a year at holidays, right? Like that doesn't even make any logical sense. We're reserving space for people who don't even live with us. Right? Like, these are things that we haven't questioned really up until that moment. Then all of a sudden we're like, I have to question it because I need space and I'm losing my mind. And so, all of a sudden people are like, oh no, now I understand exactly what you do and how important it is, because I'm not just coming into people's home and making it beautiful. I'm coming into people's home and it's so much deeper than that. It's so much more spiritual than that. And so suddenly, I'm the person who's able to give them permission to, not that they need it. They don't actually need my permission, but they're like, okay, all right, she said I can do it, so I can do it, right? Give them permission to live their life the way they need to in their own home.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm with that. There's a lot of times, and I see this with a lot of the people that I work with. We have been conditioned so much to listen to other like voices that perhaps are authority figures for us or whatever.
Yes.
And when someone like is working with me, that's in a sense that's my role, and that's even though I'm nothing like for like in terms of that, it's like just by creating that space and giving them their permission to live the life that they can live is what sometimes is required. And I'm really interested, just because this has been part of my own life for many years now. I have been what falls under the category of minimalist. Even though you can look behind me, I have a lot of books. I think that's like the most of the things that I have.
Yeah.
And the last time that I moved places, everything fit inside of a car. And I was like, just thinking last time that I moved, like, oh, well, like, like this is easy. Like I've been before living here for the past 7 years, I was more of a nomad. So I'm used to that,
Yeah,
just because, like it's the way that need to be, because you can't be a nomad with lots of belongings. And I wanted to ask you, what's the role, especially in society, Western society, especially in the US, that there's so much consumerism, and everything is being pushed as this is what you need, this is what you need, this is what you need, this is what you need. What do you think? What has been your experience with it, and what do you think about minimalism in general?
I think that minimalism means different things to different people. I mean, every word that we ever speak has a definition slightly different for every person that uses it, or connotation. And my take on it is that surrounding ourselves with more things isn't the answer, right? It's just distracting us, right? And many times, like, there's so many designers whose work like shows really beautifully on interior design websites and magazines and on social media, because they're bringing in so many accessories, so many things, and it's very, very staged. And for me, I've never really gotten caught up in that. So the photography of my stuff, I'm always like, oh, it looks so empty because I'm not buying loads and loads of stuff and putting it in these rooms. I think when we get really centered and really focused, we recognize that we don't need all these things to distract us from who we are and what we're meant to be. I think many times we're trying to fill a hole and we don't even know what it is. We're trying to fill up our life because our life feels empty. And so we start filling up our physical space because ultimately, really, we're distracting ourselves from the internal work that we don't even know how to start doing, because we're so exhausted in our brain. We're so distracted. We're so bombarded with information all the time. And so my take is our spaces need to support us. We need a certain amount of furniture and a certain amount of things to exist in this world, right? But making sure that those things are, we don't have to throw out things just because they're old. We don't have to get all new things just because we move into a new home. Many times I work with clients and they expect me to come in and tell them to get rid of all their existing furniture. And the first thing I do is tag everything that's staying, right, instead. And everything else that's going, usually we can give it to, like, here in the US, and I don't know if it's outside of the US, but it's called Habitat for Humanity. And they build homes for people who need homes and can't necessarily afford one. And so we can donate cabinets, furniture, all kinds of things so that they can have another life, right? And we can also purchase things from from Habitat for Humanity as well. But we can use the things we already have, and we can blend in new things as we need to, but we don't need to constantly be acquiring new things. And quite frankly, when we create our life and our interior to be one that is authentically connected to who we are, we're not keeping up with trends. I hate trends. Trends are a marketing thing. They're not real. And so when we let go of all of that and we simply embrace who we are and let that be reflected in our environment, we don't need to change out our furniture and our accessories and all these things all the time, because we know who we are, and we're safe, and we're confident in that, right? And then we also make better decisions from that place. So we're not buying that really inexpensive thing that's going to fall apart. We're buying maybe secondhand furniture and refinishing it, or we're buying a really solid, well-made piece of furniture that we could keep for the rest of our life and just have reupholstered, or the cushions fixed or something when we need it. So we're making better decisions because we're not just keeping up with all this buying cycle that especially in the US. And I don't think it's quite the same way anywhere else in the world, but it's maddening here. Like, it's it's insanity. It's literally insanity how much people are constantly consuming. And myself included, this is part of my own journey, is being like, do you actually need that? Or is that just advertising, right? That has made you think you need that, right? Like, it makes it feel like that whole, like you need that thing in your life, but you're never going to use it, right? And so like just taking a minute, and I always try to make myself sleep on it for a few days before I purchase anything really besides food, because ultimately that gives me a minute to just be quiet with myself and check in. And I ask my clients to do the same thing, is let's just be quiet and let's just like check in with each other, and let's create this interior so that it reflects you, but we don't have to fill it with tons and tons of stuff, right? We can really keep it intentional, right? When we're intentional, we find that medium between having so much things and having nothing, right? There's so many layers of gray in between. So I would say that my designs aren't minimalist, but they are closer to minimalist than maximalist.
Yeah.
They're somewhere closer to minimalist than anything. They definitely have, I would say they definitely have interest and flair, but it's because it's usually a flair that reminds me of the client, right? There's something interesting about them that draws your attention to it, but it's also something that they're going to have for the rest of their lives. You know, like most of my clients, you know, they still have all of the original furniture, all of the original things that we worked on years and years ago. So there's not this quick turnaround when we really get intentional about what we're doing. So yeah, I would say, you know, like I said, minimalism means different things to different people. And I'm more about intentionalism, making that a thing. It's intentionalism.
Yeah. And I think that, like, for me, it's similar. It's like someone asked me one time, that's why I shared about the books, because someone asked me one time, I was doing this webinar and I was talking about being a minimalist, and someone pointed out, behind you have all of those books, and I'm like, yeah, like, but
did you read them?
Chose them. Yeah, I chose them. I read them. Like, you know, like, it's, for me, it's not about not having anything. It's about being intentional with what I am. It's about understanding, not what you were saying, not getting caught up with the trends and with the consumeristic marketing, and being able to actually ask myself, do I really need this?
Yeah.
And one of the things with that is that, as you say, and I lived in the US, and I can definitely state that, yes, it is true. There's nowhere like the US in terms of consumerism. There's a lot of other places that have a lot of it as well. But the US is the very extreme
worst.
of it.
The very worst, yeah.
Well, more than worst, is like the very best in marketing and like and
100%.
advertising.
The best marketers and advertisers in the world are here in the US.
And you know, like, and I think that's one of the things that, in terms of being a conscious consumer, a lot of times, what you were saying, sleep on it. Like, one of my friends, that she was in one of the first podcasts that we did, like, she introduced me many years ago to the idea that if you're going to buy something online, put it on the cart and don't buy it for 30 days. Like, don't push the buy button for 30 days. If in 30 days you're still wanting to buy it, then cool, buy it. You know now that you really want it. It's not caught up in the addiction of like that instant reward that we are usually going to. That's what it's been marketed to us. And as well, what you were saying about buying quality things that last. A lot of times, like, I say to people, like, I know that this t-shirt that I'm wearing, that it's an organic t-shirt, is way more expensive than like something that I could buy in a store that is not organic. It's not even fair trade or whatever.
Right.
And I'm choosing to buy this one, and I'm going to take care of it, and I'm going to use it well, and I'm going to wash it well, and, you know, it's going to last because it's actually good quality versus like t-shirts that are not going to last, that I know the impact that they have on the people doing them, on the environment and everything. So the more that we connect with that, and of course this, I'm talking all from a place of privilege, someone that can actually make this kind of decisions. And I think that it's really important for us to understand that. And I wanted to ask you,
but
well,
even for me, I mean, I didn't grow up with a lot of money. So I wore secondhand clothes my whole life until I was an adult, not until I was adult, until I was 13. And I got a job and started being able to buy my own clothes. And at 13, I'm 6'1". So wearing secondhand clothes, until I was 13, I was almost done growing. I was about 5'11", at 13. So I could no longer wear hand-me-down clothes because there was no one in my life to hand them down to me anymore. And so I had to buy new clothes. So there's not a lot of opportunity for me to wear secondhand clothes, but anymore. But I buy really high quality things. And I think, getting to that place in our lives where like kids are wearing, we always handed our clothes down to each other, right? And we took care of them, and maybe you got a few new things, but we've stopped handing clothes down. We've stopped that tradition. We've stopped understanding that kind of, interaction. And I think it's damaged a lot of our society, right? Because it's not acceptable to wear hand-me-downs anymore, right? And marketing did that to us. It told us that that's not acceptable, that's not okay anymore, right? And so I think we've got to like really get clear and intentional on that and kind of let it be okay. Let that bleed back into our society. Let it be okay to just wear clothes. Them be well made and well cared for. And it doesn't matter what style or what trend they're part of. If you feel good in them and they represent who you are, then you go ahead and wear it.
Yeah, and I'm glad here in New Zealand, like second-hand shops aren't everywhere, and it's something that like in Argentina it's not typical. And there's some in the US and in a lot of other places that I live, but here it's way like bigger. And I think that's really interesting in terms of like how the societies work and what's culturally okay or not. And as you say, like we've been marketed certain things that are more sustainable that like it's just like, oh, are you sure, like kind of like so I think it's a really interesting thing. And I wanted to ask you in terms of something that you shared earlier, in terms of like when you were talking about energy and about a lot of these topics, how do you blend when you're working with people what we might call spirituality with their interior design?
I mean, the spirituality comes in the room because I'm in the room. And it all depends on who I'm working with. I didn't grow up spiritual. I grew up really conservative Christian, what is here in the US called evangelical, and a very narrow view of the world. And it is through my own intention that I have widened that view of the world and no longer identify as Christian, but as spiritual. And I love God. I just don't typically refer to God as God anymore because that's so loaded for me. But I work with clients of all kinds of religious backgrounds, and I respect and honor their beliefs, and they respect and honor mine. And ultimately, the way that I break it down for people is physics tells us, like when we just talk about science, right? There's a really strong correlation between science and religion, right? Like religion just takes science and kind of makes it warped and weird sometimes. But when we think about it, science tells us, physics tells us that we are all made of energy, right? And so we are made of energy. The world, everything around us is energy. And if we understand that energy isn't lost, it is simply transferred, right? And unless another, energy acts, brings a force upon it, right? Not a scientist here, so I'm not using all the right words in the right way, but I think people know what I'm saying. that we bring an energy in the room when we enter. And someone asked me a few years ago, I was working with a coach, and she asked me, we were talking through different things, and she's like, so have you ever wondered what enters the room when you enter the room? And I was like, oh, it's a really great question, right? And so I think when we get intentional with our lives, we understand that when we enter the room, we change the energy of that room simply by being in it. And so really much of my work is helping people to settle into their own energy, right? And to like recognize the energy they're bringing into a moment, especially with couples. With couples, it can be really, really difficult because there's a dynamic there, right? That I'm not a part of. And then I'm suddenly a part of it. And to know that each one of them are heard by me equally and understood, and I see them. And I think then people really start to like settle in, and they can really feel, there's a shift that happens in their relationship with one another, and then also in me being a part of their relationship for moments, right? And so I don't like, unless I know someone to be spiritual, I'm not like, it's not in their face, right? I'm not like bringing sage with, I'm not like bringing sage bundles with me and like, but I have definitely, like brought sage and smudged someone's house with them because they had this really really difficult relationship with their husband that passed away, and he was really struggling with this connection with his house. And I was like, okay, we're going to sage the house, and I'm going to, bring you these affirmation candles, and we're going to change the scent of your home, right? Because smell is our strongest connection to memory and to emotion. So changing the smell in your home changes your dynamic with your home, right? Like these are all things I get into with clients. Like there's so many levels of intention and so deep into it that like for him, we needed to change the smell of his home because I needed to trigger a different emotional response when he came into his own home. Right. And so like, this is how I bring myself into people's homes is bringing my level of intention. It gets to be left behind when I leave is hopefully that there's another level of intention that they start infusing into their own lives, and a different way of viewing the world spiritually.
That's beautiful. I always love anything that is done with intention, and everything that is done as well differently. Like it's not that typical that interior designers actually work with the client, whether we want to call it spiritually or energetically or just one-on-one or one-on-two or whatever it is, like to be able to get them to understand it, to meet them where they are, and to be able to create from that place. And I think that's something that also, like the previous times when we were talking, like understand that designing our life and how does that look like in terms of all that you shared in this episode, like having that connection with ourselves, having that intention and being able to create and to be able to also, and I think that this is something from you just shared, like not everyone is going to connect with the same thing. Some people might be open to this, some people might be open to that, some people might be more spiritually inclined, so then you can sage and everything, and some people might not, and perhaps it's like, okay, I don't do that. So meeting people where they are and being able to, as well as you were saying before, giving them permission just by you being there, by understanding the energy that you bring and what it is that you bring into the space, and that's what creates a big shift.
Yeah, because ultimately it's their home. So I honor that it's their home, and I honor their intention for their own home. So I'm not here to force my beliefs of any kind on anyone. I'm not here to change anyone's mind. I'm here to share. And if it affects you, if it feels authentic to you, then try it on in your life. And if it doesn't work, we try something different, right? But yeah, I'm more interested in just being there to support clients than I am in changing their mind or, changing their whole life. It's just, how can I be here to support you and being your best self? And how can I give you permission to give yourself permission to do what you need to do in your own life.
That's beautiful. And saying that, if people are interested in connecting with you, know more what you do, whether they're in the US or somewhere else, where can they find you and how can they connect with you?
Yeah, so my business's name is Concinnate. We never even talked about that, but my interior design business is Concinnate, and I'm guessing you might tag it in the show notes, but it's spelled CONCINNATE. I'm bad at spelling out loud. It's Concinnate.world is the website. And they can find all my contact information there, all about the business. You'll know it's me because my face is somewhere on the reel on the beginning of the website. It talks about who I am and why I founded the business, and I'm also a speaker and a writer, so it has information about that too and ways to connect with me. So yeah, absolutely, people can absolutely reach out if they have follow-up questions or they want to work with me. Yeah.
Beautiful. And as you say, we will have everything on the show notes so that everyone can just find it easy. But just wanted to give you space for anyone that is hearing this and not checking the show notes.
Yes, absolutely. Understood.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Shana, for being here with us, for sharing this. I think that there's so much that everyone listening can take from this. So for everyone listening, let us know, what did you learn? What resonated with you? What can you start to action in your life? And let us know. Write it on the comments anywhere that you're finding this. And once again, Shana, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Brian. I appreciate it.
Thank you. And everyone, until the next time. Bye.
What did you like the most about this episode? Take a moment to think about what change you can make in your life today.
Share your conscious action on social media using #ConsciousAction and tagging @ConsciousActionNZ so we can celebrate your impact on the world and create a ripple effect.
One easy action we would love for you to take right now is to share, like, and subscribe to this podcast. This will help us get these messages out into the world and inspire more people to take conscious action in their own lives, contributing to the better world we hope for.